So I'd like to put very briefly the teaching of our guest scholar, Rabbi Dr. Jane Kanarek, in context. And we are celebrating, obviously, our 50th year as a congregation. And in recent weeks, there was a celebration of the 40th anniversary of the first ordination of a woman by the conservative movement. And I think at least one rabbi of our congregation was there, probably more. And as Rabbi Dr. Kanarek was getting ordained, they celebrated the 10th anniversary of that ordination. And then after ordination at JTS, she got a Ph.D. And so one might end, that spurs me to remark that we had as a guest scholar here at Beth Am, the first woman to receive a Ph.D. in Talmud, Rabbi Dr. Judy Hauptman. So saying all that might make you think, oh, this is great. It's a history of sort of sustained progress, right? We have women that get ordained, they get PhDs in Talmud. But it's also important to know, and this is, I think, relevant to Dr. Kanarek's work, that it's a history of struggle and subjectivity, right? Dr. Kanarek got her PhD at Chicago, University of Chicago, sorry, U Chicago, because she wanted a little bit of distance from JTS, right? And then she is, one of the reasons her work is remarkable is because she's owned the tradition, she's mastered to the tradition, she's created and legislated within the tradition as part of the Committee of Jewish Law and Standards. She's got prestigious graduate fellowships like the Western Fellowships in this tradition, but she's also wrestled with the subjectivity of the tradition. One recent paper of hers is entitled, or part of the title is Throw the Talmud Across the Room, right? So she has not just written on Talmud scholarship, but also what it's like to teach and learn Talmud, right? What it's like to bring, and so she's fighting against that dichotomy that you have halacha, law over here, and Agada, the stories over here. You have to have both of them together. And so I think in what she's going to teach this Shabbos will bring both of the things together. So I'll close just by saying that I was thinking of why it says in the Zohar that God looked into the Torah and created the world, right? What does God need to look into the Torah for? God has the entire Torah, right? It's an intersubjectivity. God, just like when you make a recipe, it's not just about the recipe in the book, it's about the stories that go with the recipe, right? Chazal and Dr. Kanarek are very deliberate and conscious of the fact that they're teaching as they're teaching, and the fact that they're learning as they're learning, right? So may we benefit from Rabbi Kanarek's learning, and may we have her look into the Torah with us so we can create new worlds. And it's so important these days as free Jewish thought is being constrained, that we have someone who is at home with creative Jewish thought and the subjectivity of Jewish thought to bring us to Torah and to world creation.
I'm going to start by saying thank you for that incredibly generous introduction. And I'm going to tie back into that in a moment. But first, I just want to say, most of all, it's really wonderful to be here. And it's really wonderful to be here on your 50th anniversary celebration. And I'd really like to thank Rabbis Daniel, Miriam, and their son Shamir for welcoming me to the community and into your home as well. And it's so good to see you again, met for many, many years ago in Chicago, and just have the chance to see the vibrant community that you've created here. So thank you very much for welcoming me. If I stumble or say something that doesn't make sense, please stop me and assume that I am not, in fact, making sense. I was supposed to be on a very reasonable 8:20 a.m. flight this morning, and about 8 p.m. last night, I got a text on my phone or an email that it was canceled and I'd been rebooked on a 5 a.m. flight. So 8:20 is fine. 5 a.m. flight a little rougher. So I feel right now like I'm in the midst of jet lag. I'll be totally fine tomorrow. That's just my warning to all of you, but I should stay awake and not. Something else should not happen. Okay, so I, in this teaching, am going to begin by speaking to you and being frontal, but the reason that this introduction was really, really appropriate is I'm also going to invite you in, and I'm also going to be inviting you in to try and create grounded and imaginative worlds. So you are going to be my partner in the study that we are doing tonight. It will be a study that we're doing together. And I'm going to say a little bit more about that, or really tell you how we're going to do that very soon. So, this is called Reading the Talmud Through Feminist Eyes. When I teach about reading the Talmud as a feminist, I often get the question, I know we just studied these passages together that have women in them, but are women really there in the Talmud? Didn't you just pick these sections because they have women? Women aren't really in the Talmud. Now, I'm going to answer that question ahead of time, somewhat not surprisingly, and say, yes, women are present in the Talmud, and yes, I did pick these passages to teach you. And yes, there are many more passages like these in the Talmud, which I'm not actually going to have time to show you tonight. But of course, if I haven't convinced you by the end of this, feel free to ask me these questions once again. These questions are not off limits. So my feminism rests on an assumption of women's presence. This is true of the ancient world, and this is certainly true of our world as well. If we, as contemporary women, know ourselves to be fully present and shapers of our world, our families, our friendships, our neighborhoods, our communities, our workspaces, and the larger nation, then surely we might turn towards these ancient women with a similar assumption of presence, that indeed they too were there, and they too stood at the center. And in fact, the more that I read, write, and teach about the Talmud, the more I have become startled by and convinced of women's presence in the Talmud. In fact, what I've started to do is travel with a blue highlighter. And every time I come across something that might have to do with women or that mentions women, I just start highlighting. And so I'm slowly building up these volumes filled with blue highlighter. I have become convinced of the centrality of women to the ancient rabbinic culture that the Talmud at least partially portrays. Instead of assuming and emphasizing women's invisibility, absence, and marginalization, what I want us to do tonight is to begin reading the texts that we're going to study together with an assumption of women's visibility and presence. In other words, I want us all to place women at the center instead of the margins. That's going to be our job tonight and our task. We will be reading the Talmud with an assumption of presence and not absence. With all of that said to you, I also don't want to overlook or deny the Talmud's androcentrism, fancy way of saying men at the center, and its place in building and sustaining a patriarchal culture. The Talmud is a patriarchal document. It is a reflection of an androcentric culture. But what I do want us to do is resist these as descriptive and determinative of female absence. Because something is patriarchal doesn't mean we're not there. It doesn't mean we're also not at the center. So I don't think the Talmud's a feminist text. I'm not trying to make that argument to you. But I do think it can be read with feminist eyes. And those are the eyes that I've cultivated, and those are the eyes that I'm going to bring us into. I'm also not, right now, intentionally not defining any further what I mean by that, because that's going to really emerge from the examples that we see in the Talmud itself. For now, all I need you to hold is simply, it's an assumption of presence and standing at the center. I also just want to note, somewhat marginally, so to speak, just that you can try this exercise not only with women, but any time that you hear the word about marginalization, you can ask yourself the same question. What happens if I shift and start with an assumption of standing at the center? So, this is what we're going to do together. We are going to ask ourselves, as we study these sections from the Babylonian Talmud, what do we notice if we start with an assumption of women's presence rather than an assumption of women's absence? What possibilities might open when we shift our lens to assuming and beginning with this presence? And who and what might we notice that we might otherwise have overlooked? And what questions might we consider that we might otherwise have left unasked? So this is an exercise in noticing and trying to shift our lens so that we train ourselves to ask a whole series of questions that we might not have otherwise considered. Now, with that said, I also want to provide us with a word of caution. What I have noticed over the years is that this practice of shifting our lens to notice women is actually quite difficult. For not only are other characters, topics, and themes rightfully fascinating, they are, we have also been taught repeatedly to turn our focus away from women. Considerable attention by scholars, rabbis, teachers, and students has been directed elsewhere. So in my experience, all of us, whoever we are, wherever we stand, need practice in this shifting of lens and focus. Centering women requires us to utilize a mode of reading that is grounded in details and simultaneously imaginative. It requires a comfort with play, gaps, and indeterminacy rather than total certainty. And centering women requires us to work in contexts that are small and specific, as well as larger and more general. And what we are going to do is try this work with the Talmud. So we're going to try this work with a document that was put together sometime between the 6th and probably 7th, maybe 8th century, but reflecting both that time period and much earlier as well. So here's what we're going to do. You all have source sheets in front of you. And what we're going to do is we are going to start this process by practicing with a story from Tractate Ketubot. So this is a story from a larger cycle of stories. There are actually 7 stories total in this whole story cycle, but we're going to be jumping into one of these stories. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read this story aloud. We're going to try and all get on the same page with the details here, and then we're going to do a trial run of reading this story with trying to have women at the center, not at the margins, and see what this opens up for us about what might actually be happening in the world that the Babylonian Talmud is describing to us. I also want to say that regardless of whether or not you have studied Talmud before, you can jump into this conversation if you have read anything and have had an opinion about it. All this needs is reading, not experience in reading the Babylonian Talmud. So that is my invitation to you to jump in, but not yet. Okay, so I'm going to read. Rabbi Chama bar Bisa went and sat for 12 years in the study hall. When he came back, he said, I will not do as did the son of Hakinai. I'll fill that in a moment. He went and sat, Rabbi Chama bar Bisa went and sat in the study hall. He sent a message to his home. Rabbi Oshaya, his son, came and sat before him. He, Rabbi Chama bar Bisa, asked him questions about legal traditions. He saw that the legal traditions of Rabbi Oshaya were sharp. He was distressed. He said, if I had been here, I would have had such a son. He entered his house. His son entered. He, Rabbi Chama bar Bisa, stood up before him, before Rabbi Oshaya. He thought he wanted to ask him a question about an authoritative legal tradition. His wife/house, same word, said to him, is there a father that stands before his son? Rami bar Chama said about him, a threefold cord is not quickly broken. This is Rabbi Oshaya, the son of Rabbi Chama bar Bisa. So our first pass is as follows. We're just going to map out what's happening in this story without extraneous details. So I'm going to ask you, Rabbi Chama bar Bisa went, and how long does he leave for? And where does he go? Excellent. Then what happens next? Great, he comes back, and what does he say? Great. he says, I'm not going to do as the son of Hakinai. Now I'm going to fill in some information from an earlier story in the story cycle. The son of Hakinai also goes away and goes home without telling his wife, and she sees him and she dies. And then he manages to revive her. So when he says that, he says, what he's saying is, I'm not just going to show up at my house without actually having announced that I'm in the town first, because I don't want my wife to just die because I show up. Okay, so, but what does he do? He makes this statement, and then what does he do next? He goes and sits. First, he goes and he sits in the study hall. Then he sends a messenger. And then what happens in the study hall? Great. And what happens next? What does Rabbi Chama Bar Bisa do? He quizzes his son. And he sees that the legal traditions that his son Rabbi Oshaya knows are really sharp. They're really good. He knows his stuff. That's what he sees. And what does Rabbi Chama Bar Bisa feel? He's really distressed. And what does he say in your own words? I missed this opportunity to know my son. And if I had been here, oh my God, I could have raised a son like this. It's kind of what I'd say in inappropriate language is like, oh shit, I should have had this son. So then he goes and he enters his house. And then who enters after him? Right. And then what does he do? He stands up, and standing is a symbol of deference in rabbinic culture. And the he's here are a little bit ambiguous here, but I think from reading other stuff what's happening, again we can debate this, is that Rabbi Chama thinks that his son wants to ask him a question about an authoritative legal tradition. But I want to note, I'm not 100% sure about that because the pronouns are totally ambiguous here. And then, what happens next? What does his wife say to him?
Why are you standing up?
Why are you standing up? What are you doing? And then we have this quote tacked on at the end from Rami Bar Chama, a threefold cord is not quickly broken. This is Rabbi Oshaya, the son of Rabbi Chama Bar Bisa. He is apparently, Rabbi Oshaya is the third generation of Torah scholars in the family. Okay, so this is our opening story. So I'm going to start with asking you actually a very, very broad question here, which is simply, we are going to make our way to women. What do you notice in this story that you find intriguing or interesting?
Rabbi, could I have a reasonable accommodation that when you're sitting in the back, we hear you asking the question and we hear a murmur, but we don't know what the answer was? So are you willing to just say what the people said?
Absolutely. Thank you. Not a problem at all. Okay, I am going to, wait, before I take hands, I'm going to count to 15, so you all have time to kind of think. Usually the same hands go up first. So this is the 15 second. I have to count because when I bought my watch, unfortunately I bought without a second hand, which is a problem for teaching. So I'm counting. Okay. Broad question first. What intrigues you?
Can you talk into the mic all the time?
Yes.
Thank you.
What intrigues you?
He doesn't recognize his son.
He doesn't recognize his son.
Who taught his son?
Who taught his son? Great.
Basically, his son got the knowledge without him because he wasn't there.
So who taught his son? His son got the knowledge without him because his father wasn't there. Great. What else?
He doesn't thank his wife for raising the son.
Okay. He doesn't thank his wife in this story for raising the son. What else?
I have no idea what the aphorism means. That threefold fold.
What is this thing tacked on to the end? Great. No idea what this means.
Maybe there's a connection to Rashi with 12 years.
Maybe there's a connection to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who hangs out in the cave for 12 years. Is there a kind of motif here of 12 years of going away as well? Great.
Well, also Rabbi Akiva was away, I think, for 12 years, and then another 12 years. Well, the threefold cord, it can be 3 generations. Is it possible the son learned from his mother, and that's the third part of the cord?
Right, there's a threefold cord here, so is it possible here that the son might have learned from the mother? Great.
What is the wife/house mean? Is the word actually?
What's the wife/house? Yes, so that one I will actually answer now. So the reason I translate it that way is the word is devethu, and that word in Aramaic both means house and wife. So that's why I put the slash there, is that it's one and the same word. The word they use for wife is also house.
How feminist.
Deeply, but we're going to open that up in a moment. Okay. One more hand. Okay, yes, in the back.
I'm like, went away for 12 years to a study hall, then he came back and went to the study hall in his own town.
Yes.
I'm like, why didn't he just stay in his own town?
Right. Why did he have to go away? Why couldn't he have sat in the study hall in his town?
12 years in the study hall. Why?
Great.
Why did he go?
Great. Why did he leave? Why did he leave? Excellent. So now what we're going to do is play with this story for a moment and think about all the relationships here. And because what I've charged us to zero in on is is women, I want us to think about the wife house here, and I want us to think about the multiple relationships that are operating in this passage. So Daniel Boyarin has coined the term married monks to describe this phenomenon of men that's in the Babylonian Talmud specifically, not in the Yerushalmi, the Palestinian Talmud, of men marrying first and then leaving their wives for extended periods of time to go and study elsewhere. So this is a motif that we see specifically in the Babylonian Talmud of a tension between the commandments to procreate and the commandment to study Torah. And the way in which the Babylonian Talmud resolves that tension is by this marrying first and then leaving and going to study and then coming back. The Palestinian Talmud does it the other way around. They leave and study first and then come back and get married. But the Babylonian Talmud gives us these married monks. So he's away for 12 years and he comes back and he doesn't recognize his son at all, who has grown up into this powerful scholar. He goes home. We don't have anything here about him greeting his wife. That's not here at all. His wife is called his wife house, Amrla Devethu. She speaks. I want us to note that she speaks and she chastises him, which means that she also knows what the proper posture is for a scholar in relationship to a student. So she is familiar with the conventions of the rabbinic study hall and the proper relational mode of father-son or sage-student as well. She is named as a wife, but she is clearly also a mother here, not just because she has a son, but because she's also chastising her husband as a father. Is there a father that stands before his son? We also don't know in this passage how old the child is. We don't really know how old he was when the father left, though my image is that he must have been quite young or a baby for the father not to recognize the child when the father returns.
So I'm losing a little bit, but is it possible while the father was away, the mother was actually doing all the instruction and everything that the son knows is because the mother taught him while no one was around watching to see that a woman was teaching his son?
It is very possible that while the father was away, the mother might have taught the son what he knows. So the question is, if I'm going to say that from this text, and we have the threefold cord possibility as well, that maybe there is the mother right in the middle of this chain as well, and therefore that is the reason the cord can't be broken. So if I have that question, reading this story about the son who has become a sharp scholar and an outstanding scholar, how might I actually prove that without saying, oh, this is just something that I like and want to say? So there are a couple things that I will do with my feminist eyes. One is, I will start to look for outside evidence. What's happening actually in schools, in educational curriculums, not just within rabbinic culture, but in contemporaneous cultures as well. So for example, we have evidence from Greek papyri that women were teachers and women were teaching children. So we know that this is something that was actually, these are papyri from actually Elephantine. Actually, they're written in Greek, Alexandria, that women were teachers. But we also have something from the Talmud itself. So I want you to look now at your next source. It's from Tractate Sota of the Babylonian Talmud, again. And we're coming in the middle of a long sugya. And the sugya is really debating whether or not it is Torah study, or what it is engaging in Torah study or practicing commandments that has protective power. The sugya is not really, the passage is not specific about exactly what it means by this protective power, but somehow Torah study and performance of commandments protect a person from from bad stuff befalling them. That's the best way I can say it. So the sage Ravina says, in all cases, it is the merit of engaging in Torah study that protects a person from evil befalling them. He lifts up Torah study above the practice of commandments, of mitzvot. So that's where we're coming in. And in the middle of that statement, Ravina says the following. And as to what you said, that she is in the category of one who is not commanded to study Torah, and nevertheless performs the commandment to study Torah, granted that they are not commanded to study Torah, I'll come back to that in a moment. However, for the merit of teaching their sons to read scripture and to learn the oral tradition, and for waiting for their husbands until they come from the house of study, do they not split the reward for Torah study with them? So, there is a concept that women are not commanded to study Torah, and there is an idea that someone who is commanded to do something and does it is greater than one who is not commanded to do something and nevertheless chooses to do it. So that's where we jump in. So granted, women aren't commanded to study Torah, but how do they get the merit for it? You all laughed, so I know you got it. They get it for the merit of teaching their sons to read scripture and to learn the oral tradition, and for waiting for their husbands until they come from the house of study. Now, the next thing you might say is, well, Jane, if this is written in the Talmud, surely someone else would have read that and said, well, women were teaching their sons Torah. That's not such a radical claim to make. But what actually happens is, usually when you read this passage, you will read it translated as, however, for the merit of hiring teachers for their sons to teach them scripture, and hiring teachers to teach them to learn the oral tradition, and for waiting for their husbands until they come from the house of study. That's what you will read. What is really interesting about that translation is, number one, it reflects the commentary of the 11th century medieval commentator Rashi on the Talmud. That's what he says. But number two, it does not actually reflect the grammar here that's in the Babylonian Talmud. The grammar is, I'm going to go grammar geek for a minute, it is the causative form, the af-el form, which is to cause their sons to read scripture. So you could push that and say, well, how do I cause my child? I hire a teacher. But you could also read it without doing that extra step and say, the mothers were teaching their sons to read scripture, to read Chumash. And they were also teaching them the oral tradition. And in fact, we have a number of statements in the Talmud of women who actually know laws, for example, about the kitchen, about food preparation, about kashrut, and not only about things to do with the kitchen, They know laws about Passover, for example. And part of the reason this is also realistic is we know that in this period, what's known as the Amoraic period, learning did not happen in yeshivot, our image of scholars sitting in rows. Learning happened in small disciple circles. And these disciple circles met in homes, in alleyways, in courtyards, and homes were all built around alleyways and courtyards. So it is very reasonable that women would have also overheard these disciple circles teaching and would have been able to teach as well.
Well, there's the story about the rabbi's maid who picked up a lot just overhearing the rabbi's discussions.
Yes.
She saw a man beating his son, and she said, the man should be placed under a ban because it's like he's placing a stumbling block before the blind. And the rabbi said, she's right.
Exactly, exactly. And since Zachary introduced me by mentioning Judith Hauptman has collected all of these statements from Tractate Psachim of the Talmud of women knowing halakha and women overhearing halachot. So, one more. Yeah.
What was the course of study to become a learned rabbi?
We don't totally know. There wasn't a formal course of study to become a rabbi. What was the course of study to become a rabbi? There wasn't a formal course of study, but it seems to be rabbi conferring it on disciple.
But it could happen in 12 years, for example.
It could happen in 12 years, it could happen in less, but none of these, in this story cycle, no one leaves without the title and has the story being about them coming back with the title. They might come back with knowledge, but not with title, which is also just intriguing and interesting. So let's shift gear, one more in the back.
It seems like if Rabbi Kanarek went away for 12 years, it's because he didn't think that he could get the learning that he needed in his local study hall. And yet, here's his son, who'd be saying, wow, this guy is really sharp.
Right.
But he's not necessarily giving kudos to the wife. He's saying, here stands this son, who is my son.
Right.
Right? So it's not only that there's no recognition, it's like, well, obviously I must have passed this down to him.
Right. If I'd been here, I would have passed this down to him. And it also begs the question of what's the relationship between him and his wife as well.
Yeah, maybe I'm of a former generation, but in my generation, my understanding was that the reason the women weren't following the halakha or the mitzvot, they didn't need that. They had a connection with God with all of that. Men need the discipline of study. So that's why they have to do all the time-honored things. It's not that women are less, it's that they are higher. So to me, I would think the reason he went somewhere else is he wanted to be somewhere away from his family. He would have no child-rearing responsibility. He wouldn't have to worry about a wife. He wouldn't have to worry about his Sabbath responsibilities. He could just be a monk or whatever.
Right, a married monk. Absolutely, that might very much be part of the reason that he went away. My guess is that even in the ancient world, even when he went away, he had a lot of responsibilities because we tend to forget actually how much went into daily life, pre-refrigerators, pre-electricity, all of that stuff. And I mean that actually really, really seriously. I also just want to say that idea of the man being on the woman being on a higher spiritual plane is a relatively modern idea, and we don't actually find that in this ancient literature at all. Okay, we're going to switch gears to another tractate right now. We're going to turn to page 2, a little more reading through feminist eyes. We're going to switch topics so that you can see that this kind of overflows. I want us to push against some of our assumptions. The Mishnah teaches, Mishnah Kiddushin, another section of the Talmud, teaches that for a man to betroth a woman, so the first stage of marriage, he can do it either with money, a document, or sexual intercourse. The very same chapter of Mishnah also teaches about how a man can acquire land. He can acquire land either through money, a document, or what's known as chazakah, a presumption of ownership, which in some cases is sitting on the land. So you can see where I'm going with this, that one could very easily read that Mishnah and say, the rabbis think that marrying a woman, acquiring a woman, is just like acquiring land. That's not great. So in that very same tractate, though, I'm going to read you two stories from that very same tractate. Now we're moving to the Talmud. We're on page 2. A man was selling glass beads. A woman came and said to him, "Give me one string." He said to her, "If I give it to you, will you be betrothed to me?" Or you can translate this as he said to her, "If I give it to you, be betrothed to me." She said to him, "Give it, give it." Said Rav Chama, every give it is meaningless, meaning they're not betrothed. Okay, so, sorry, I left out an important thing. In order to be betrothed, this object becomes the kesef, so I have to both, I'm just going to give it to someone and say, "Will you be betrothed to me?" or "Be betrothed to me." I'm married, so it doesn't work if I do it. Okay, can't do it twice at the same time. Can do it multiple times. Okay, next vignette. A man was drinking wine in a tavern. A woman came and said to him, "Give me 1 cup." He said to her, "If I give it to you, will you be betrothed to me?" She said to him, "Give me to drink, give to drink." Said Rav Chama, every give to drink is meaningless. She's not betrothed. A man was throwing down dates from a palm tree. A woman came and said to him, "Throw me too." He said to her, "If I throw you, be betrothed to me." She said, "Throw, throw." Said Rav Zavid, every throw is meaningless. They asked a legal question. Well, what's the ruling if she says it just once? Give or drink or throw? Ravina said, Ravina shows up again, she's betrothed. Rav Sama Bar Rikta said, by the crown of the king, she's not betrothed. And the law is that she is not betrothed. So what do you notice about women here in this story?
She has to give consent.
Okay, she has to give consent to this betrothal. What else do you notice?
They have to properly ask her.
They have to properly ask her, in the back.
She's taking the lead.
She's taking the lead.
They might be inured to men's bullshit, and like, yes, they have this habit of like putting these weird things on. I just want a cup of wine,
just give me that wine. Enough with the
wine.
betrothal thing. I just came in here to sit at the bar and have a drink. And what are you doing with this? Please be betrothed to me stuff.
Yeah.
Great.
I hear misogyny. I hear, women are demanding and, hungry and sensual and want things from men.
Okay, so we might hear misogyny. Women are demanding, sensual, want things from men.
It has to do with intentionality. Like the intention that she had when she's asking, and his intention when he's offering.
Great, so it has to do with intentionality. His intention her intention when she's asking, his intention when offering. So we're learning something legal about betrothal and its mechanism and how it happens here. We also learn here that women are out in public. They're not hanging out in their homes. They're going out to buy glass beads. They're going into taverns. They're going somewhere where there are palm trees. There are no fathers supervising them here. They seem to be walking around in these stories alone. And these women who are portrayed here seem to be very comfortable asking for things, demanding things. This is not a woman who is like land at all. We don't know actually anything about her relationship with these men. She might know them before, she might not know them before. We don't know if she wants to be betrothed or not be betrothed, but it could be a pickup line. We don't actually know who's using the pickup line here, whether it's her or him. And it's very possible that she's also saying, I just came to this bar for a drink, enough, enough. Just leave me alone. So let's just do the next story from Tractate Kiddushin, Bavli Kiddushin, same tractate. There was a certain woman who was selling belts. A certain man came and snatched a belt from her. She said to him, give it to me. He said to her, if I give it to you, will you be betrothed to me, / be betrothed to me? You can see this as a theme. She took it and was silent. And Rav Nachman said, she could say, yes, I took it, but I took my property. Rava raised an objection to this statement of Rav Nachman. A Braita is an early text from the same time as the Mishnah. If a man betrothed a woman with property that was taken by robbery, or with property taken by a forced transaction, or with property that was taken by theft, or if he grabbed a sella, that's a coin, grabbed a coin from her hand and betrothed her with it, she is betrothed. Oh, wait, let's get rid of that. We're gonna get rid of that. We're gonna differentiate between what Rava said and the earlier case by saying one's apples and one's oranges, so to speak. There, when Rava is speaking, there it is referring to a case where he had previously arranged to marry her. So presumably she knows what's happening there. But let's look at the woman here. Who is she? What do you learn about women from these texts?
She's an entrepreneur.
She's an entrepreneur. She's selling belts here.
She's also an independent person because she's got a job.
She's also independent because she's got a job. Again, there's no family member here that is supervising her.
She can own property.
She can own property. She also has no hesitation in taking back her property when it is taken from her.
He's making a major assumption that he should take it from her.
He is making a major assumption that he should take it from her. But again, if we went with this idea of her like land, we wouldn't expect her to snatch it back, but we can also see under there that he thinks he can do this as well in the back.
In both this and the one previous, do they talk about the next day at all? Or is it just
They don't talk about the next day. So going into the realm of imagination, that might be where I would go if I was spinning it out to the next step, but they don't go into the next day at all.
That just seems like the worst of something in a newspaper, something that you steal something from somebody, and then you go back in the store and you buy the jewelry with the money that you just stole the night before or something like, or something with taxes or something that you're gonna, I don't know, that sounds like the worst swim plan in life.
It's bad, right? It's bad, and it makes it into the Talmud nevertheless. And what I'm intrigued in is, what can we actually see or imagine or understand about what's happening with women in this ancient world by reading these somewhat unexpected stories? Although, you had a hand?
Yeah, I think there's an acknowledgement in all of this of a woman's free will, in the sense that it's all about this physical act of becoming betrothed, and how these sort of trickeries that might be don't cause betrothal, and the woman really has to choose. So it's an acknowledgement of equality.
Right, it's acknowledgement of some kind of equality, free will that's happening. She speaks too. She's not silent in these stories. She's not silent.
Were men this desperate that, that any woman they encountered, they would say, hey, you're betrothed to me? I mean, is this the way marriage was
12 years in the study.
So I don't know if men were this desperate. When I go into my imagination head, there are multiple ways I can go. I really need a drama person here to help me do this, actually. But you can imagine that he is this awful character walking into the store, grabbing the belt, taking it from her, desperate, just be betrothed to me, I need a wife. But I can also imagine a scenario where they actually know each other from before. We see that peeking out at the end, or maybe they've spoken. And then I could say it more gently, and he's flirtatious, right? Oh, be betrothed to me, right? And so some of it depends on the intonation that I read it with. Probably the obnoxious first one is closer to what's happening here, but I do want to open the possibility of how little we know, and to ask also what happens if we read it a little more softly.
Is there a
as
little
well.
kind of wink when it says a certain man? A certain man, you know, it's a certain gentleman called?
It kind of means every man, but it would be really fun to play with it in that way. A certain man, one could absolutely do that as well and have fun with it in that way.
Oh, a certain woman at the top.
Yeah, it's a certain woman, a certain man, but you can imagine writing a story saying, oh, there was a certain woman and there was a certain man, and inflecting it in that mode as well.
So if
it's understood that he already knows her and she knows him, could we presume that she is saying, I don't want to marry you anymore, and he is coming to her to say, take this belt, I'm taking this belt because you already agreed?
Absolutely, one could read that story into this. It's not the only way to read it, but yes, one can read it. And again, if you take that reading of it, you then have men and women, males and females, negotiating their marriage with each other, instead of the kind of fiddler on the roof image of the father or the matchmaker negotiating the marriage.
So it says, she took it and was silent.
Mm-hmm.
So, in my primitive mind, I can read this at least two ways. She doesn't respond to him because she merely reacquired the property that was already hers and felt no need to explain.
Excellent.
On the other hand, maybe he says to her, will you be betrothed? And her silence could be assumed to be assent.
Your brain is not at all primitive. That is exactly the debate that follows in the sugya. In the Talmud's continued writing about this story, it tries to figure out what her silence means. Does it mean rejection or does it mean consent? And that is so important because here what we have is this tension between her voice saying, give it to me, and then her silence. And what do we make of that?
So as an aside, out of curiosity, do the scholars resolve this question?
Not totally, but
good.
Yeah. Yeah.
The silence could also be, let me think about it, I'm not ready to say yes or no right now.
Yeah, it could absolutely be, let me think about it. 1, 2.
So also because neither man or woman has a name, I think we could also think maybe this didn't actually happen and it's just a story the rabbis are telling to figure out the halachic boundaries and not necessarily say this actually happened and they witnessed it.
Great. So the Talmud, I think, in some ways wants us to read this as an excuse to figure out halachic boundaries. What I'm interested in, though, is the fact of the story's presence, regardless of whether or not it happened, because it's being in the Talmud means that they could imagine a scenario like this. It's in their realm of possibility. So since it's in the realm of a possible happening, I actually think that we can learn about women from this story because it is in the realm of their imaginative possibility. So that's how I understand it. I actually believe this exact thing probably didn't happen, but I could very much see this happening in a rabbinic marketplace.
What age did people get betrothed back then? Because it feels like something that would happen. Obviously, you have a single man or maybe boy and girl or woman. I mean, again, they're engaged in business, but still, and it feels like something that a 15-year-old boy would do.
I think late teens.
Late teens.
Yeah.
It just feels like the way they're acting is...
Late teens, early 20s.
Whether it's flirtatious or hostile, it feels like something that a teenage boy would do.
Yeah. We don't think they got married as young as our preconceptions are. Adiel Schramer is a scholar who's done some work in this, and he does not put it in the early teens in general, which is really interesting.
It's interesting, like a belt is a very intimate garment, right? And I don't know the Aramaic word, I was just looking at it, but it sounds a little bit like, I don't know if this is off base, but it sounds like stroch, like the shoelace, which the rabbis make a huge deal about, like this, like, you should die rather than change your shoelaces, right? So like, it feels like a trivial thing, an intimate garment that could be a really big deal in the right intimate context.
Right, we have to think about, that's such a wonderful observation of what he took, which is a belt, and the different things that a belt as well might symbolize here.
We're assuming the men are single, but was polygamy practiced at the time? Is that necessarily an assumption?
Great question. Polygamy is, for men to have more than one wife, is still permitted at this time. How common it is, it doesn't seem to be so commonly actually done, but it is technically permitted at this point. I'm gonna get one more and then do the last.
This may be sort of extrapolating, but could it also be like, if you know a guy and you really want to marry him, but he doesn't have a dowry, you can kind of slip him the money, and then you should tell your father, oh, look, he gave me the money, now we can get married.
You absolutely could do that. The Talmud doesn't actually talk that much about men lacking a dowry, which is interesting as well. But this would certainly be, if your father didn't want you to, a way to get around it. I'm intrigued by the fact that there is no father here, and that the fathers are really absent from these stories. These women are autonomous. They're not there. I want to do one more story with you. And this story is from a different place in the Talmud called Arachin. And Arachin, you need a little bit of background. It's a very short story. So according to the end of the book of Leviticus, a person could dedicate their worth in money to the tabernacle, and that later becomes to the temple. It's fixed amounts of money that vary depending on age and gender. The Talmud takes this and continues with this idea that people have fixed worths of money, and they can take an oath saying, I'm dedicating the worth of myself to the temple. That is considered to be an act of piety. Instead of you yourself, for example, as Hannah dedicated her son to the temple, instead of dedicating your actual body or the body of a relative, you would give money. So this is an act of piety. The rabbis also came up with another way to do it, known as mishkal, which is weight. So you could dedicate the worth of your body weight, weigh yourself, and dedicate your body weight to the temple in gold or silver. And this is considered to be an act of piety. I want to read you a very short story from Tractate Arachin about this. And a story about the mother of Yarmatya, who said, the weight of my daughter is upon me. So she took an oath to dedicate the weight of her daughter to the temple in Jerusalem. She went up to Jerusalem, and they weighed the daughter, and she, the mother, donated her weight in gold to the temple. There are a few things that are peeking through just in this little vignette, and I'm going to wrap up by adding a few more things to it. First of all, this is a story about a mother and a daughter. We have the daughter's name. We might be able to guess that the mother is wealthy because she's dedicating the daughter's weight in gold. We also see mother and daughter journeying alone to Jerusalem, to the temple, and an act of dedication. So we see a pious mother here. What does this mean for me to unwrap this story with even extending my feminist eyes a little bit further? So first of all, there's an earlier version of this story in what's known as the Tosefta. The Tosefta is a document put together sometime in the 3rd century, around the same time as what we know as the Mishnah. And in the Tosefta, there's a version of the story where the daughter is sick. Yarmatya is sick. And the mother says, if my daughter heals, I will donate her weight to the temple. And the daughter heals, and they journey together to Jerusalem. So now you can see a mother with a daughter in crisis, a daughter who's sick, and the mother doing this, what we call this votive act, in the hope that her daughter will actually heal. And the daughter does actually heal, and the mother follows through, and they go on this pilgrimage to Jerusalem. So again, you can see the mother-daughter relationship there. But I want to add one more thing about it, which is peeking out from the Babylonian Talmud here is a larger cultural phenomenon of women and pilgrimage. So we know that in the 4th through the 6th century of the Common Era, Christian women were going on pilgrimage to Jerusalem. They were traveling as mothers and daughters. They were traveling as non-related women, groups of women going together, and they were making these monetary donations to different things in Jerusalem. So what we actually see here is a mother and daughter participating in this larger culture of pilgrimage that is happening in the ancient world at this time. So what I've done here is look at this story, look at the relationships, and say, oh, let me also open my lens again a little bit wider and see how these women, these Jewish women, these rabbinic women, are not actually standing alone, but part of this larger cultural phenomenon. So what does it mean to me to read the Talmud with feminist eyes in this case? It means exposing and questioning our preconceptions of what women's lives have to be like. It means exposing and questioning our preconceptions that women did not have voice, that women did not teach, that women did not travel, that women were in the house, that women did not have religious lives. In fact, what we see here in these brief texts is that women had religious lives. They had sons that they taught. They had daughters that they traveled with. They had money. They were merchants. And they went into bars for drinks. So I look forward to, thank you for your wonderful comments, and I look forward to studying them.
So join me once again in saying Yasher Koach to Rabbi Dr. Jane Kanarek. What an extraordinary teacher of text. We're celebrating 50 years, as Zach mentioned. We're celebrating 40 years of conservative women rabbis. And when we think about Beth Am Synagogue and our values, we're celebrating these 5 core values. I would suggest to you that there's a 6th kind of hidden but really essential core value of Beth Am, is that when Beth Am was founded in 1974, this was founded as a fiercely egalitarian congregation at a time that it wasn't a given that women would become president of synagogues, and yet Beth Am's 2nd president was a woman. And it wasn't a given that women would have bat mitzvahs, and they did at the very beginning at Beth Am 50 years ago. And it wasn't a given that women would be sort of playing an important role as teachers and rabbis, and that hasn't happened in this congregation. So as I think about the legacy of Beth Am Synagogue, I can't think of a better, more appropriate, more wonderful scholar to lead us on this journey as we come toward the close of our 50th year. So tomorrow you can continue to learn with Rabbi Kanarek. Please come to shul. As I said, there are going to be these wonderful testimonials about Limud. We'll hear from Fred Katz, who'll speak about the People's Talmud that he started here. We'll hear from Rabbi Kelly Glutz, talk about the birth of Jewish Discovery Lab that Rabbi Tyler Dratch has really furthered and advanced in some beautiful ways. And we'll hear from Bonnie Goralnik, who will talk about the legacy of Dr. Lou Kaplan, our founding spiritual leader, who was an educator par excellence in Baltimore in the 20th century. And then after Kiddush lunch, we'll continue to learn with Jane. And then in the evening, we'll get to learn with Dr. Kanarek one more time at 7 o'clock. And there will be, I don't know if it's a bar, but there will definitely be wine and cheese. So Yasher Koach, Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and get home safe.